Welcome into the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today is Tuesday, December the 2nd. I'm Zach Ewing with the guys who have covered this LSU football coaching search as well as anybody. Wilson Alexander, breaking news left and right. Scott Rabelais dropping takes right and left. And they are here for this special Tuesday edition. Tuesday, because on Monday, Lane Kiffin was introduced as LSU's newest football coach, guys. So this saga is at an end. It ended almost exactly 5 weeks after Brian Kelly was fired. And LSU has a new coach.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't. Yeah, 5 weeks is a very long time in a coaching search, and obviously this started very quickly after they fired Brian Kelly. But they got their man. I think they got the guy they targeted from the start as their number one person, and that's not always the case in coaching searches. It often is not. So a heck of a job by Verge Osbury and the new athletic director and their staff to get it together. But we'll talk about all that. But yeah, it was a coup, you could say, for LSU to get him.
I mean, I think if you look at the openings around the country, I'm not sure who else you can say got their first choice. Partly because Lane Kiffin was the first choice at like 4 different schools, and LSU got him. But everybody else
say maybe like I don't know, maybe. Well,
Virginia
Arkansas
Tech?
didn't seem to get its first choice.
Oklahoma
but Virginia
State,
Tech,
maybe?
Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
In the SEC in particular, though, everybody's it was a Lane Kiffin domino that had to fall before everything else could fall into place.
But a lot of coaches decided to stay where they were too, and so the options were going to be somewhat limited if you didn't get Lane Kiffin. So LSU did, good for them. Do want to let you know before we get going that the LSU Sports Insider is sponsored by Jerry Lane Cadillac. Command the road in a Cadillac where luxury, power, and presence come together. Experience it today at Jerry Lane Cadillac. The press conference. It was not, in my eyes, your typical coaching press conference. I mean, Lane Kiffin is not the most polished guy in the world. Am I wrong in saying he almost seems like he's a little bit of an introvert? Like he's not totally comfortable in those situations. He cleared his throat about 100 times. I mean, he kind of rambled. But all in all, you could tell he was excited. You could tell that LSU was excited.
I've started talking in recent days to people who know Lane Kiffin or have covered and worked with Lane Kiffin, or know other people who work with Lane Kiffin. Try to get a sense of who is this guy. And you're right in that assessment that his social media and sometimes televised bravado or such is not exactly who he is. Really one-on-one and in more private settings. He can be kind of aloof. He is a little bit shy. I think he is an introverted person who sort of puts that stuff up kind of as a front, it seems, a little bit. And that's obviously part of his personality because he goes and he does those things. But yeah, you could tell during the press conference, rocking back and forth a lot, not necessarily loves being in a setting like that. But I also think he handled it pretty well. He got asked some pointed questions, especially related to the departure from Ole Miss. And I think probably certainly for Ole Miss fans, they would think what he said about how torn he was might be, they might not believe him. But, he went into that decision well, I thought. And, there were some canned answers, but there was also some funny stuff and lighthearted things. And he, I think, did a good job of playing to the administrators and the boosters and all those people who were in the room. Because it wasn't just reporters. There was a good 200 people there, and we only were about half of them. So,
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's a Lane Kiffin kind of, who he is in person, and there's Lane Kiffin certainly that you see on social media. There's kind of a different persona there. And you can tell by his tone of voice that he's kind of an introvert. He's not someone who's just booming across the room when he's talking, And
not Ed Orgeron.
No, not like that. And not like Brian Kelly. I think Brian Kelly was more comfortable in those situations, but he warmed up as it went, and telling the funniest story was about channeling his inner Ed Orgeron as he drove past Tiger Stadium Sunday night, and he said, I'm feeling you, I called him, and you had it in your story. Orgeron said, Coach, you're the best place in America, and I think being conflicted is part of it. I do believe he was conflicted.
I think so too.
Highly so. You can't leave, and most coaches who are hired for a job like this, where they're taking, I would say, a step up, is they're successful, and so they're leaving a place where they've had success and made ties, and unless they're just frustrated with the way things are trending at the school, like I think Kim Mulkey was when she came here 4 years ago, it's going to be difficult. Nick Saban, they said on the flight down from Michigan State, was like second guessing himself all the way down. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? Should I stay? Is it a mistake?
And Nick Saban, and Lane Kiffin said he felt some of those same kind of things on Sunday too.
And you're going to do that as great as we think the opportunity is for him at LSU and the potential, but I thought his excitement about coming to LSU was also undeniable, and I thought some of his quotes were really good, like being on the visiting sideline when he was offensive coordinator at Alabama or as head coach at Ole Miss, and feeling the weight of Tiger Stadium for a big game, just the weight. He said, I thought, imagine what we could do, saying Lane, what we could do with how we coach players and what we do with that behind us, and I thought obviously. Playing to the crowd a little bit, giving people what they want to hear, but it was good.
But also, that was insight into why he found LSU's pitch so appealing. Why he left a playoff-bound team was, a few weeks ago, Florida played at Ole Miss, and it was a record-setting crowd at Ole Miss, 68,000 people, huge night game there. And he was asked a softball question about the crowd and all that kind of thing and the stuff that they had built at Ole Miss. And he said, kind of didn't really acknowledge it at first. He said, were you here last week when they played the Citadel and there was barely anybody there? And then you contrast that to what he said about Tiger Stadium on yesterday, talking about, like Rab said, imagine what we can do with this behind us. It was very different from like what he was saying at Ole Miss. Now I'll be curious to see, he's never been in Tiger Stadium when they're playing Western Kentucky at 6:45 at night and all that. But, there is that sort of grand potential at LSU where if you have a team rocking, that it's going to be full all the time. And so I think that was part of what he found appealing about it. LSU also, in its pitch, really kind of appealed to his ambition by telling Verge Osbury said to him at one point during sort of as they were going back and forth over the past few weeks, like, you've done all you can at Ole Miss. I'm going to paraphrase slightly here. You've done all you can at Ole Miss, but if you want to compete for championships and win the national championship, this is what you got to do.
I think one thing in your story,
and he believed it.
Yeah, that stuck out to me was Ole Miss got jumped by Oregon in the CFP rankings last week from 7 to 6, and Verge sent him a text or called him, I'm not sure, and said at LSU we don't get jumped. That doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, LSU could get jumped at some point, but that, to your point, that was exactly what Bird was trying to relay, was that, like, you're not going to run into that kind of here. You're not going to run into that perception problem here. You're not going to, this is, Bird told him, one of the 3 premier jobs, in Verge Osbury's opinion, in the country: LSU, Ohio State, and Georgia. Those to him are the top 3. And then you also had Nick Saban and Pete Carroll and others that Lane Kiffin respected in his ear saying just that, like, that is one of the top jobs. That is a premier job. And I think for Lane Kiffin, he's always seen himself in a job like this, and that he didn't want to probably miss out on the chance to go and take it.
I think it was really interesting that Pete Carroll, he said, kind of channeled what he thought his father would say to him, Monty Kiffin would say to him, saying, take your shot, boy, go do this. Because Pete Carroll was the ire of LSU fans for so long, because LSU and USC shared that 2003 national championship when he was the coach at USC, and there was so much, angst at USC claiming that national championship, the AP national championship, while LSU won the BCS title, which LSU fans would have done the same. If it was reversed, they would have claimed the AP national championship. But it was just funny that it was, and they never played, they never got to play each other in that era. And didn't play until last year in Las Vegas. So it was, I thought that was quite interesting that Pete Carroll, after all these years of being just kind of, an enemy of LSU, considered that by the fans, is someone who helped steer Lane Kiffin to LSU.
And Nick Saban, who's been a thorn in LSU's fans' side for years.
They loved Nick Saban at one time, though, obviously, here.
I think you and I both sort of heard that maybe early on in the process, LSU did sort of say, like, you sure you don't want to come back, Nick? And Nick, obviously that got shot down very quickly. But Nick seemed to tell them like that he would recommend Lane, and then obviously he recommended to Lane that he should take the job at LSU.
And that brings us to kind of this decision that Lane Kiffin had to make. The allure of LSU is obvious to anyone who's been at Tiger Stadium on a Saturday night for a big game. I mean, it's just electric. And now, as you said, sometimes Western Kentucky comes into town, or sometimes it's UCLA at 2:30 p.m., 90 degrees outside, and
which to the fans, understandable in those situations.
It's not always like that, but I mean, when it's going well, it is. I mean, I haven't been to every stadium in the country, but it's got to be right up there with anybody as far as the atmosphere, the home field advantage, and just the infrastructure edge that you would have at a place like this. But on the other side, Lane Kiffin had to leave a place that he really built up at Ole Miss, and he built it up really from nothing, a mediocre SEC school, to a college football playoff team, and had to walk away from the college football playoff. And during that process, he talked about the ire he experienced from Ole Miss fans who he said they tried to run him off the road. He was driving to the airport with his son. They were obviously at the airport. There's video out there of them giving him the middle finger and booing at him as he walks to the plane and everything. This was a pretty emotional, even traumatic experience for Lane.
Yeah, that's where things start to get really complicated. If Ole Miss was 9-3 or something, and they're on the outside looking in the playoff, they probably don't deal with any of that. But because it was a playoff bound team, and Lane Kiffin would say, didn't seem to think there was a problem in the idea that he could just coach Ole Miss through the playoff and then take the LSU job. Ole Miss obviously disagreed with that. I can see why Ole Miss would disagree with that. You don't want him around your team if he's going to coach one of your chief rivals in the SEC soon thereafter. But Lane Kiffin seemed to think that he could do it. He said yesterday that he told Ole Miss officials, this was during meetings Saturday night and into Sunday, that he had a plan for how they could make it work and all of that. And Ole Miss officials didn't see it that way. And that's why things got so messy. It's also kind of why the timeline played out the way that it did on the LSU side of things. LSU was waiting for Lane to kind of give that official word to Ole Miss that he was leaving. They had been confident for more than a week, as we talked about, I think, before on here, that he was coming. And then once, but Lane Kiffin did that on Saturday night with Ole Miss officials. LSU signed him to his term sheet on Saturday night. It was done. At some point Saturday, officially on the term sheet, that date is 11/29/25. And so at some point Saturday before midnight, Lane Kiffin signs with LSU. And then, it's obviously spilled out into Sunday, the logistics, all of it, and got really messy. And now LSU's got to go to Ole Miss next season. And Rab and I have talked about this, I think, a little bit yesterday. Think about how Lane Kiffin had a mustard bottle and golf balls and all sorts of random trash thrown at him when he went back to Tennessee.
Where they also go next season.
Right? A decade after he left Tennessee. A decade after he left Tennessee. He's got to go to Ole Miss next year. We don't know the date of that game yet, but oh my gosh, I almost worry for some people's safety and his. They're going to need to do a lot of safety precautions going into that game to keep everybody from getting bombarded with stuff. Because I could understand that Ole Miss fans would be very angry and direct that at him in a certain way. But Lane Kiffin, the night he left, puts on his Instagram, brings that up, and says, "Spot the ball," which is just oh my gosh, he's just playing right into it.
They're going to need that cop who he said escorted them to the airport Sunday to help provide the security. Verge Osbury, we got him in a scrum off to the side after Lane left the podium, and he said again that LSU was willing to wait through the college football playoff, and he also said, which I think speaks to why Ole Miss. One of the reasons Ole Miss didn't let him coach, he said, it would have been a great advertisement for LSU, basically. They would have been talking about Lane Kiffin during the broadcast and everything and leading up to the game that he's going to LSU, blah, blah, blah. And obviously that's something Ole Miss did not want because it sees LSU as a rival. Ole Miss has Mississippi State, but Ole Miss feels like they're up here and they feel like Mississippi State is here. And LSU has Ole Miss, and LSU feels like it's here, and Ole Miss is here, even though Ole Miss has certainly the better team right now. So it's... it would be. I've heard someone say. I think it was Matt Moscone. I want to give him credit. Imagine if an LSU coach directly left LSU to go to Alabama. It would be a similar feeling. Nick Saban, of course, did not do that. He went to the Miami Dolphins first. But imagine if they did. And I think there would be a similar vitriol that coach would face. But it's always been a great rivalry. And I think you asked me, does this add another layer to it? I said, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be tremendous because Ole Miss, I think, was at the base, if I may say, in my opinion, at the base of their anger with Lane Kiffin is the fear that they're going to regress as a program now that he has left, while LSU may ascend.
Lane Kiffin, for better or worse, I think has become a villain in college football to non-LSU fans. Not just Ole Miss. Everybody else around the SEC, around the country, is looking at this as a situation where, really, for the third time in his career, Kiffin is just sort of up and left. He did it for USC when he was at Tennessee. He did it, I guess, when he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and Nick Saban had to kind of tell him.
Well, he got kind of, you remember, because that year he was going to come to LSU as the offensive coordinator unless he became a head coach. He got the FAU job, and then, Nick Saban had to fire him before the national championship game.
Because he felt his priorities were sort of mixed up. Yeah. And so this is now the third time we're in a situation like this, and then he's had dramatic departures from the Raiders and from USC, not of his own doing, but like it seems like everywhere he goes, it's a messy breakup. He has become the villain, and by extension, LSU, I think, is going to become a little bit of a villain. Do you agree with that?
I can see that in some respects it would be, but I also think that you're going to now get an LSU where, remember we talked right after Brian Kelly got fired about how there were people around LSU, and I think other folks just outside the program even had this perception that it had become very kind of sterile and corporate, and it didn't have that sort of LSU swagger to it. And I feel like you're going to see that come back, which could probably win a lot of people over. But there will be those who don't want to root for Lane Kiffin because of the way he left Ole Miss for sure.
As someone who is from here and went to LSU, I think LSU fans enjoy kind of wearing the black hat. And I think Lane Kiffin, everybody talks about fit. Everybody always talk about fit and culture and everything. I really think Lane Kiffin fits into that. Like, they don't like you, they don't like us. Fine, let's go over there and kick their bleep and win championships. And I think both Kiffin and LSU fans kind of like to beat you and kind of let you know about it. Maybe in subtle and maybe overt ways. So I think if he wins, obviously the caveat is always, if he wins at the level that people hope he wins, they're gonna love him at LSU. They really, and his antics and all the things he does on social media and the things he says, and he's clearly a clever person, and some of his things are very subtle when he's making a dig at someone. So I think LSU fans perceive themselves as being kind of the black sheep of the SEC to begin with. I don't think people really hate Georgia, for the most part. or
maybe now, I think it's more out of jealousy, kind of like people hated Alabama out of jealousy.
Yeah, exactly. But LSU is kind of a different thing. And once again, LSU has a coach like Brian Kelly. He left Notre Dame, and he's saying family at the basketball game. And Ed Orgeron, he's this crazy Cajun, and Les Miles, he's eating the grass. I mean, it's been another line of coaches for LSU that people can deride. But if LSU wins, all that's certainly on the local level, all of that's is smoothed over.
It's easy to see why. I mean, Lane Kiffin is sort of playing the victim here and saying,
that's what the issue is. He's playing the victim and not taking responsibility and seeing why he is being hated.
You left the team in the middle of a playoff run that Ole Miss very, very rarely in its history, if ever, has had an opportunity like this.
And go back to the 60s,
yeah,
right?
And he left in the middle of it,
SEC title.
and then acted like, well, what do you mean I don't get to coach the team in the playoff? I kind of get it, and he's done this before, and so I think LSU will deal with that. But you're right. I think we get this schedule for next year in the next couple weeks here. Usually at some point.
Should be next. I think it's next week.
After the SEC championship
After the SEC
game.
championship game, and the tickets for that LSU Ole Miss game. You look on SeatGeek, it's like going to be like Texas A&M last year, where especially because there's only 60 some odd thousand seats in that stadium, so supply and demand. Man, if they're going to have a lottery for those tickets or something, because
to speak to that,
auxiliary press box too.
Yeah, really, real quick. we don't know, what kind of team Lane Kiffin will be able to put together in his first year. But next year's schedule is, I mean, you can anticipate already those 2 road trips to Ole Miss and Tennessee, and then Clemson and Alabama and Texas A&M come here next season. It's going to be unbelievable.
I hope he has a good enough team for LSU fans to be able to enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, we're going to move forward. A quick note on Lane's contract, which he said that he didn't know the number of. You should not believe him when he says that. 7 years, $91 million, with a lot of incentives, Wilson, which you broke this story, including, interestingly enough, LSU is going to pay him for the incentives he would have earned at Ole Miss this year.
It's pretty unprecedented. Yes, well done, Jimmy Sexton. He wins again. Yes, LSU is going to pay him whatever he would have made had he been able to continue to coach at Ole Miss, and that kind of speaks to his desire, how much he really wanted to continue to coach Ole Miss through the playoff. All right, I'm going to sign with LSU, but y'all got to give me this. And so that could be up to $1 million. If Ole Miss goes and wins the national title without him, LSU will pay Lane Kiffin $1 million. Hard to see that necessarily happening, but even if they just play in a first-round game, he gets $150,000. So it pays to be Lane Kiffin right now. There are some other things. The other, I think, major incentive in the contract worth knowing, if Lane Kiffin wins a national title, there's an automatic escalator that would then make him the highest paid head coach in the country. And that's only a kind of a one-time thing. I don't think.
Because right now you don't think he is. You think he's just behind Kirby Smart.
Yeah, he's number 2 behind Kirby.
Yeah.
And ahead of Ryan Day, even though Ryan Day has won a national title. We'll see how long that lasts. Coaches get moved up. And the other thing to note so far is all we can see about the buyout is that it's 80% of whatever is owed to him, and that's fully guaranteed. There's no mitigation clause, no offset like we talked about with Brian Kelly, where if he gets another job, that gets reduced. It'll be interesting, though, to see. This is the term sheet. The full contract, I'm going to be fascinated to see if there's anything that LSU was able to get with the buyout to make it more team-friendly. Like if there's any sort of or any other performance-based incentives or affects the things that you can kind of do with the performance, because that was something that Governor Landry and that LSU officials were thinking about during this process. It seems like most of those concepts didn't necessarily make it in. But let's go ahead and point out one thing, because I know there's been a lot of like, oh, Governor Landry talked about all this stuff and then that none of it happened. Well, some of it did a little bit. The automatic escalator if he wins the national title, that's a performance-based incentive. And also if his postseason bonus structure is higher than Brian Kelly's. If Lane Kiffin were to win a national title in the SEC championship in the same year, he gets $4 million. Brian Kelly could only earn like a little over $1 million in that same situation. So there are some things that made it into the deal that LSU was talking about, but it is still very Lane Kiffin friendly.
7 years versus 10 years.
That too, yes. Yeah. Shorter term, so if by year 4 you want to fire him again, it's not quite as expensive, but it would still be costly.
Yeah, and having said that, if it does go poorly in year 3 or year 4, whenever, and LSU is on the hook for this huge buyout, even if Lane Kiffin gets another job, as you mentioned, people are going to replay that press conference from Governor Jeff Landry saying, oh, we want to get away from these buyouts, and this is my problem with Scott Woodward, and then signing a guy to a contract that could potentially include that. But Rab, like we talked about that at the time, that's the price you have to pay if you want to swim in these waters.
I have to believe someone or someone's got to the governor and made him understand that this is the market, and if you want to get the best coach that you can, this is what you have to do. And as Wilson said, definitely he got some things he wanted, and Governor Landry was not wrong about some of those things. It's ridiculous. It's still ridiculous that this guy's going to make $1 million a month, coaching LSU football. I think $1 million a year is plenty to coach college football or college basketball, personally. But that's not what the market will bear. And you never would have gotten Lane Kiffin if you didn't have the kind of contract. Okay, it's not 10 years. It's not this. It's not that. But you're getting other things that are enticing. And I do believe he knows how much he's making. But
and Landry and Kiffin talked during this process.
They did talk.
They did have a call.
That was interesting. But if I can, I want to say something at this time about the whole process, because it got off very badly for LSU. Landry making his inflammatory statements. Scott Woodward gets fired. Verge Osbury is the interim. They hire Wade Roof as president. He says he's the acting AD. The attempt by LSU to fire Brian Kelly for cause, which they had to back off of, subjecting LSU and Louisiana to enormous nationwide ridicule, and deservedly so in a lot of cases. But as I wrote earlier during this coaching search, it's a long time. Time gets kind of gets compressed, or it kind of gets extended in a coaching search, and they had time to. The governor stopped making, comments. Have you heard anything from Governor Landry about this in the last few weeks? No. They hired the president, who they hired Verge Osbury as the full-time athletic director, and they got the guy they wanted. And I think that's a lot of credit to Verge and the people at LSU who finally got their act together. Again, there was reason to criticize. I will never understand why they've tried to think they could fire Brian Kelly for cause, other than it's just some kind of ploy, some kind of to get pressure on him. But in the end, this was the guy they targeted from the start, and this is who they got, and that's a rare thing, especially in these circumstances. I think a lot of people thought LSU's just going to. They might wind up hiring Blake Baker, which I think was probably a fallback plan for LSU, which, we'll see how that would have gone. But that's not who they got.
I don't know if it was, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But it seemed like they weren't going to get the guy who everybody wanted. Lane Kiffin's not going to go to LSU. He's going to take the Florida job where things are better. Although, are they better or not? I don't know. He's going to stay at Ole Miss. That seems, more likely, because they're going to match anything they wanted. In the end, they didn't. And I think it's kind of remarkable in a way. Kind of remarkable.
Yeah, and Governor Landry did. I think he was on Fox News yesterday saying they were interviewing about something else. I'm not going to get political, but they did ask him about it, and he said, "Yeah, we got our man." And I think, to his credit, he didn't totally back off, saying this system is still broken, and I'd like to do something about it. So he did mention that yesterday, and I think you're right. I just don't know what that is, if that's what the market will bear. So in the end, tumultuous, chaotic search process leads to success for LSU. It kind of encapsulates the last 20 years of LSU football. It's like
that's always
that's how it is.
Yeah.
So we will take a break, and when we return, we will come back and talk about what's next. Building a coaching staff for Lane Kiffin, trying to get a recruiting class signed this week as well. Coming up next on the LSU Insider.
I think the biggest thing that separates us is our people. We have a really amazing staff that really care about their customers, really care about our product. At Jerry Lane Cadillac, we value trust and transparency above all else. We have a little bit of something for everyone. So whether it be the 2025 Escalade, any of the smaller crossover vehicles, the XT4, 5, and 6, we've also got a wide variety of new EVs, including the 2025 electric Escalade IQ. I think the product lineup right now is the best that it's ever been in Cadillac.
Did they ask you to do the commercial too?
Yeah, but they just gave me one line.
Bet like a Caesar. Like, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna tell them how Caesar's Sportsbook is just so easy to use that you can watch and bet thousands of sports events, even some NFL games.
They'll probably show us betting on our favourite players and teams at all the Vegas hotspots too.
Like, we have time for that montage.
I told him I couldn't do it.
They couldn't afford me.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You give me love.
Welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider. I'm Zach Ewing with Wilson Alexander and Scott Rabelais. You can subscribe to the LSU Sports Insider on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and hit the like button, leave a comment while you're there. Let us know what you think of Lane Kiffin's opening press conference, what you think of the hire, and what you think of Lane Kiffin's staff members. So we're going to talk about that now. This staff report is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered. with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. Okay, so here's what we know on staff. Wilson, I'll let you take it away, but we know basically a lot of Lane Kiffin's offensive staff is coming with him from Ole Miss.
Correct. LSU has already finalized the hire of offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss. That's the big one. But they've also added Joe Cox. He'll be the tight ends coach. They've added 2 wide receivers coaches. One of them is also the passing game coordinator. His name's George McDonald. And then they are starting to assemble kind of a new front office too. Nothing has been finalized about Austin Thomas's future at LSU to this point, but it seems certainly in doubt. They haven't necessarily finalized the hire too of Billy Glasscock. We haven't gotten that term sheet yet, but he is going to be coming with Lane Kiffin. He has already come with Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. It's the new GM. And so, yes, Lane Kiffin has most of his offensive staff here already in place. They'll need to go get an offensive line coach and a running backs coach. The running backs coach is the one that's probably most intriguing at this point. Lane Kiffin has told people that he wanted to bring Kevin Smith with him from Ole Miss. Kevin Smith is still at Ole Miss. And obviously, LSU has Frank Wilson, who has such deep ties in Louisiana, especially in the New Orleans recruiting area. He has expressed a desire to stay on staff, and we'll see kind of how all of that plays out. That's sort of so now it's, kind of remarkable. Within a day, LSU's offensive staff is pretty much in place. You've got a couple things, like I said, to fill, but it all happened very, very quickly now. Lane Kiffin's here. The offensive coordinator's here. All right, great. And now it's on the defensive side. Does Blake Baker get retained? He's under serious consideration to be retained. I think that is certainly the hope, is that he'll be retained, and then along with him, a lot of the defensive coaches. But all that's still kind of got to get set. Blake Baker, our Gary Smith confirmed yesterday, did interview at Tulane. That's his alma mater. I don't know how serious of a candidate he is for that position at this point. But anytime you interview for a job, we'll see we have to kind of see where that goes, and make sure that to kind of continue to follow that. But I still would think that there's probably a stronger likelihood that he's LSU's defensive coordinator next season. And
just to remind folks, Lane's defensive coordinator at Ole Miss, Pete Golding, was quickly elevated to be the head coach. So they've already made that move. So he's not coming. Hammond native and everything. And of course, there's the Ed Orgeron factor, isn't there? Could he come back?
I kind of want to nip that in the bud a little bit, at least at this point. I have not heard from anybody that is really going to happen. And maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe it will come together, because I know there was that report from CBS Sports about an openness on the LSU side to that happening. I just have not heard anything since that report came out that would actually suggest to me that is something that is even in the works or being thought about in a serious way.
But does some people say Kyle Williams may not want to coach?
I don't know. We'll have to again sort of see how that plays out as well on the defensive side.
I think Corey Raymond, do you think could stay?
Yeah, I think he could.
Yeah.
So there's really two halves to this. So the offense is mostly set, as you say. The defense is still very much open, and that's what we're going to have to keep an eye on in the coming weeks. Sticking with the offensive side, Rab, I think this for Lane, and there were reports of these ultimatums that he gave his offensive staff that you better get on that plane and come with me, or you're not coming with me. But for him, it's very much if it's not broke, don't fix it. Bringing on Charlie Weiss Jr. It's not Charlie Weiss, the former Notre Dame coach. This is his son. And Ole Miss had a great offense. They were able to make it work with Trinidad Chambliss, a Division II transfer quarterback. I think Lane trusts these guys, and obviously he is the mastermind of the offense.
Yeah, it's his offense. I gather Charlie Weiss calls the plays for the most part, but it's Lane's offense. He's the architect of the whole thing. So
they're the brain trust.
Yeah, right. So it's an interesting dynamic. So I think you see Lane with that big play sheet, and I always kind of thought, well, he's calling the plays, but apparently that's not the case. But why would you not want to let him keep the staff together the way he wants it on the offensive side? And why would he not want to try to do that as much? In his time at Ole Miss, they had a graphic during the Egg Bowl Friday, and I added the stats from this past weekend. Ole Miss has gained more yards than any other team in the country in the FBS during Lane Kiffin's tenure. It's like 37,000 something yards. I mean, the number doesn't matter, but it's been quite successful. so they would want to keep that together, and I think that's obviously for LSU followers, or those of us who cover the team. It's just been painful to watch this offense this year. I think it's one thing that's going to be different. I don't know who the players are going to be, how that's all going to look, but they've got to be more. Cokie Riley and I we talked after the game in Oxford this year, just how creaky and clunky LSU's offense looked with Garrett Nussmeier playing quarterback. But Ole Miss's offense just kind of flows, and it's just it's very different, and he's one of the best offensive minds in the game, and it's going to be better. It's going to be better next year.
Joe Sloan, as I understand it, was not known for being able to sequence plays very well. You're not going to run into that problem with Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss. They're very good at that, using one thing to set up something else later in the game, at being unpredictable. That is going to be something that should be an advantage for LSU, as long as it can get the right players on the roster to be able to execute that. That's one of the biggest things obviously happening this week.
Yeah, and that'll be big. And then one thing about Ole Miss offense is we think of explosive plays in the passing game, and Jackson Dart was the quarterback there. They can really run the ball well, which is obviously what LSU has struggled with. Kejuan Lacey, their running back up there, is a finalist for the Doak Walker Award. I mean, they run the ball as well as anybody, so that'll be a welcome change.
Balanced offense.
The run, everything goes through the running game there with Ole Miss, because if they can run the football well and stay ahead of the chains. Did I just say Ole Miss? I have to start saying LSU now. If LSU will be able to run the ball well, stay ahead of the chains, then Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss, then they can use tempo and go fast and keep defenses on their heels, and then everything starts to kind of fit together in that way with the passing game as well. But yes, it all starts with being able to run the football well. And if Harlan Berry in a Lane Kiffin offense, I think that could be pretty nice.
That could work. And then a quick note on Blake Baker. You mentioned him, but it feels like a really good match. I mean, he obviously did a very good job at LSU and has for a couple years now after really taking over a sunken ship and resurrecting it in a lot of ways. And then from Lane Kiffin's side, Rab, you mentioned like Pete Golding elevated to head coach at Ole Miss. Before that, Lane Kiffin's defensive coordinator at a lot of his stops often was his father, who is obviously not around anymore. And so Lane Kiffin needs somebody to step in there. Here's Blake Baker. That marriage makes a ton of sense to me if Kiffin can get it together.
And if not Blake Baker, say he takes the Tulane job, could we see Kiffin reunited with DJ Durkin? He was his defensive coordinator, I believe, at Ole Miss before Pete Golding. He's been at Auburn. He didn't get the Auburn job. Is he going to want to stay, not having gotten the job, or is he going to be offered the chance to get the Auburn job? Who knows? We don't cover Auburn, but that might be a name to watch.
All right, we're going to wrap things up with a little bit of talk on early signing day. Here on the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by Jerry Lane Cadillac. You mentioned it, Wilson. He needs players. LSU currently, I believe, has the number 12 class in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings. That includes a couple of 5-star recruits, Richard Anderson from Edna Carr being one of them, who we kind of heard some news on today. Maybe he's waffling a little bit on. There's also, I'm going to blank on his name, from U-High. Lamar Brown, another 5-star recruit who met with Lane Kiffin the first night he was in town, conveniently located there at U-High, basically on LSU's campus. And so they've got some good pieces. Obviously, it's a quick turnaround for Kiffin to do a whole lot more than that. He's going to be kind of playing defense. Yeah,
they kind of got there's some potential flips out there for them. There's a receiver whose name is suddenly escaping me. I apologize, who had just recently decommitted from Oklahoma.
From Lafayette, right?
Yeah. And there's... they kind of got to keep what they have in place, especially on the defensive side with some of these defensive linemen. This is a really strong defensive line class for LSU, led by Richard Anderson and Lamar Brown. There's not a whole lot on the offensive side that you get really excited about as a recruiting follower, but it's you still need to kind of continue to add those pieces. They need receivers. We've already seen 2 wide receivers enter the transfer portal, or say they're going to enter the transfer portal, and Jelani Watkins and Kylan Billiot. So, and LSU's about to lose a bunch of receivers who are just losing their eligibility. They got to go and probably get more. So there's a lot of work to be done in that regard. I mean, gosh, the past couple of days for the staff, it's just been like, that's what it's really been about. Because you kind of have these two. It's an interesting dynamic right now, right? Like you've got the Lane Kiffin guys coming in. You've still got the LSU guys there. Some of them are certainly going to need to stay on through the bowl game. Some of them will also need at some point to get other jobs. You've got the Lane Kiffin guys now recruiting for LSU, trying to get caught up to speed on what's in place, what's going on. Like especially today, like finalizing NIL agreements and all those sorts of things. A lot kind of happening all at once. And to your point about Anderson, there was a report from LouisianaSports.net that he's likely going to delay his signing to kind of see how the staff shakes out. We'll see if that actually ends up happening. He also said on his own social media that he was still, at least as of this morning, signing tomorrow. So a lot of things going on when you have a staff in transition like this one.
Very, very notably, LSU only has like 16 commitments or something like that right now.
It's a fairly small class.
Very notably, they do not have a quarterback.
Just going to interject. Braden Allen was the name of that wide receiver.
Thank you very much.
Braden Allen from Lafayette.
So that's obviously a priority. You're losing Garrett Nussmeier. We don't know what's going to happen with Colin Hurley going forward. Michael Van Buren said he wants to return, but that's a very fluid situation. I can't begin to predict who could be LSU's starting quarterback that first snap next season. So it's they've got to go get someone in the transfer portal or find someone in high school recruiting. But they got to get someone in the portal, or maybe two guys.
I think they need two guys in the portal. And Lane Kiffin said, he mentioned yesterday how he couldn't go out and get to the portal yet because obviously it opens January 2nd, but that he couldn't sort of wait to do so. And LSU's probably going to have a pretty large, and it's going to need to be they're going to need to hit on a lot of their transfers because they got a lot of holes to fill, and we can probably get into that further down the road exactly what this roster needs. But at quarterback in particular, it's going to be really interesting. Does Lane Kiffin try to bring Trinidad Chambliss with him?
He would have to get another year, right?
Yes, he has applied for a waiver to try to get another year of eligibility. So that is obviously it is contingent on that happening. But that could be something that LSU tries to do. Imagine if you took the head coach, the offensive staff, and the quarterback.
And go back to Oxford next
When
year.
they're playing in Oxford again, let's get that calendar.
That'd be interesting.
The top of LSU's class: Lamar Brown, Richard Anderson, Deuce Geralds, Trenton Henderson. These are defensive linemen. That's important too. I mean, there are some holes, as Wilson certainly said clearly, but the great SEC teams over the last 20, 25 years, they're really good on the defensive front, and that's where LSU needs to get better.
No doubt. Well, that's as good a place as any for us to wrap up today. We'll be back with another episode on Thursday with Koki and Reed, and we'll talk some signing day and exactly what went down and maybe some flip candidates, like you said. This is why Lane Kiffin had to make that decision, because you had to get here to start to build your 2026 roster. Coaching Ole Miss in the playoff, it's difficult to do that for both schools. So you can see why that happened. But before we go, guys, any final thoughts on Lane Kiffin introductory press conference, the path he took to get here, or the path going forward?
I thought it was interesting, and to be self complimenting. I asked him a question about: do you feel this is a career defining move for him? And it was interesting how he kind of talked about Pete Carroll and Nick Saban. He's 50 now. He's been through a lot. This is his 6th head coaching job overall. He said some I left by choice and some I didn't. But Nick Saban was 49 when he came here and kind of started building his legend. Pete Carroll was 49 when he took the USC job. And so very similar points in their careers. And he said all these experiences, good and bad, have helped shape him and make him ready for what I think he has to hope, coming in here anyway, is going to be the part of his career that defines him the most. And there's a lot of things people always feel about Lane Kiffin, but if he can come here and win a national championship or two, then he would be thought of in a different way. That would become a lot of his legacy and changing what his legacy is now. So I think it's important to him in that regard.
There's a lot of potential in this hire for LSU, and I mean, there was a lot of potential with Brian Kelly as well. And so you never know exactly how it's going to work out. Tom Fornelli of CBS Sports says that every time a coach hires somebody, he says this on Twitter, he's like, it was a great hire. I have no idea how it's going to work out. And that's how it is with Lane
Yes,
Kiffin.
exactly.
LSU went and it landed its top target. And as Rab said, it's rare from a search from start to finish, like you get the guy that you want. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to, sometimes you stumble into somebody further down the list and it's great, like with Jay Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a lot of potential in this hire here. If Lane Kiffin can bring the things that he's done successfully, especially the past few years in this new era of college football, with how you manage a roster and the financials of that, and blend, put together a great, exciting offense, and that LSU's still able to get back to playing great LSU defense, and with all the swagger of LSU kind of back to maybe, then it could be an exciting time. I think it's going to be an adventure. The Lane train's rolling down the tracks, and you got to be willing to go along for the ride, however that looks like, really. And it could bring you some really exciting moments. It will be full of drama, but it should be really just a fascinating period in LSU football history.
I agree with all of that. I mean, I always laugh when people say home run hires. The guy's not even in the batter's box yet. Like, all you did was pick the pinch hitter who's coming up next. So,
well, I love that real quick that Lane said that. He kind of made that point in his press conference yesterday, where he was like, "We had all these people at the airport like celebrating us," and I'm thinking like, we haven't done anything for you yet.
Yeah. So we'll see. I am confident in saying one thing though: it will not be boring, and
Absolutely.
we will be here every step of the way to cover it with you on the LSU Insider. So with that said, for our producer Courtney Lawrence, who, by the way, she's sick. She still came in today, so kudos to Courtney. And for Scott Rabelais and Wilson Alexander, I'm Zach Ewing, and we will see you next time on the LSU.